Welcome to the Proceedings podcast. I'm Bill Hamblet, the editor-in-chief of Proceedings at the Naval Institute. Today is Friday, the 2nd of December, and this episode of the show is brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield dental coverage. I can't help myself from smiling right now. That's because I have Blue Cross Blue Shield FEP Dental. I pay no deductible for in-network services. My in-network preventive care is fully covered, including 3 cleanings a year, and plans start as low as $20 a month. Learn more at bcbsfepdental.com. Okay, so welcome to the show. It's the beginning of December, and as we've been doing for the last couple of months, our first podcast of the month is to highlight articles in the newest issue of Proceedings. And the December issue went live 2 days ago, and it's a great issue, and it's out now. And my co-host today is my deputy, the deputy editor-in-chief of Proceedings, retired Navy Captain Bill Bray. Bill, great to see you.
Hey, great to see you. Great to be here.
Yeah, we're going to highlight, we'd love to talk for hours about the full issue, which every issue is full of just amazing content written by mostly active duty Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard authors. We can't hit everything, but we're going to highlight a couple of articles that we think are of, maybe particularly salient right now, given things that are happening in the world. So, Bill, happy Friday. Why don't you start off?
Okay, sure. I'll start out with Robert McEwen's article, Assessing Military Capability, More Than Just Counting Guns. This was the third prize winner of the Naval Intelligence Essay Contest. Robert is a retired intelligence professional who has worked for the Navy, the Army, and currently lives in Australia. Robert's main point here is that, once again, that the most recent war, the war in Ukraine, Russia's invasion in Ukraine, has exposed how intelligence agencies, not just in the United States but other places, overvalue technology and equipment and numbers of equipment, and undervalue the human aspect of war fighting. Nobody, very few people anyway, besides the Ukrainians themselves, thought they would put up such a fight. Not only they're putting up a fight, they seem to be, in some places, winning the battle against Russia. And Robert goes back in time in this article, and back to probably early in his career, and talks about some of the assessments that were produced over the years on the Soviet military by the Defense Intelligence Agency, and how it undervalued the human element. And then we had, in the late 80s, we had some defectors come out of the Soviet Union, Soviet Air Force, others that gave some pretty sobering assessments of the morale of the average Soviet airman or soldier. So it's really a well-done article, and certainly worth any intelligence professional's time to read, to factor in, but more generally, anybody in the national security business.
Yeah, it reminds me of something I put in my editor's page to sort of wrapping up 2022, and that was the takeaway, or the quote from Napoleon, that the moral is to the physical as 3 is to 1, right? That there's just so many intangible things that have to be counted, or you have to try to account for when you're trying to assess an adversary's capability. There's capability, there's intent, and then there's the human element of combat. And the Ukrainians are certainly showing that in spades, and the Russians are showing it in the opposite sense. And I think McEwen, his article is just terrific. He definitely earned his pay there with the third prize winner of the Naval Intelligence Essay Contest. It's a terrific essay.
Yeah. He also talks about previous then Soviet external military operations, like the one in 1956 into Hungary, into Budapest. And he talks about how many of the Soviet soldiers in that didn't even know they were in Hungary. They thought they were in Germany fighting Nazis. The Russians tended to keep it, quiet about what they were doing. and they were confused. And we saw some of that in Ukraine, right? Some of the Soviets that were the Russians soldiers that were captured said, we thought we were just exercising, on the other side of the border. We had no idea we were going to even do this.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it was a pretty large percentage of, especially the conscript force, that was assembled down in Southwest Russia and in Belarus, that thought they were just there for a big exercise, and then they were told to, step off the line of departure. And I think many of them didn't really realize that they were crossing, the international border into Ukraine until they, started, either their unit started firing or they started being fired against. Yeah. So I want to just highlight Austere Roberto, who's one of our most consistent listeners, I guess, biggest fans, I might call him. But he points out an article written by Joel Holwit, who's been on the podcast recently and has written a number of things. The Navy isn't ready for paperless. And that was just a great short commentary about, how few computers there are. Joel's the CEO of the Toledo, which is going through an extensive yard period. But how few computers are available to the officers on his submarine, but also the crew members, and trying to go paperless is something that the Navy's been promising to do for quite some time, but just still is not there. And I think Joel even mentioned the fact that there's on the computers on his or laptops on his submarine, still running a version of Microsoft Windows from 2013 that is no longer supported by Microsoft. It might be supported by, Navy NMCI, but it's not supported by Microsoft. So, the Navy just really has to, speed up and do a better job of moving into the paperless environment. And in order to do that, they've got to have more workstations, more computers, and better updated systems, that for sailors and officers to do the work if they expect them to do it paperless. So I love that one too. One of the first ones I wanted to highlight is a piece by two German naval officers, and we get a lot of great content, not just in our International Navies issue every year, which used to be March but is now in May. But throughout the year, we get a lot of stuff coming from our allies and partners. And in this particular case, the article is called NATO Navies Must Get the Balance Right. And the authors are Captain Sascha Rackwitz and Commander Mark Baumert, German Navy. I plan to have them on the podcast. I just reached out to them a few days ago and asked them if they're available later this month. So I don't want to spoil the whole article. But, these two they've read Wayne Hughes, they've read Mahan, they've studied the Falkland, the British Navy, Argentine Navy, Falklands campaign. They're looking at what's happening in Russia, Ukraine, the Black Sea these days. They're examining some of the weaknesses of NATO navies and making some really strong recommendations for better training, for more multi-domain operations, including cyber and space domain operations. They're making the point that training has to be much more realistic, and that NATO also has to balance what the U.S. Navy's been challenged to balance, which is the capability, the force structure, versus forward deployed, being forward deployed. And they're not saying that NATO navies can give up the operations that they've been doing, for example, anti-piracy operations off the west coast or east coast of Africa, or Gulf of Guinea operations, or other things that CENTCOM operations in conjunction with U.S. Navy carrier strike groups, but they've got to do a better job of finding the balance. It's a particularly good piece by a couple of NATO partners, German Navy officers. So I like that one a lot. What was another one of your better articles or best articles, favorite articles from this issue?
Yeah, I think the American Sea Power Project edition article this month by Jake Beber on cyber power as a key element of sea power is really good, and I think it's really timely for those that maybe not be following along. The Navy is going through some real tough discussions with Congress and some introspection on its cyber forces. Long story short, the Congress is not satisfied that the Navy is investing enough in cyber capability, particularly expertise. That it's gotten to the point where the Congress is almost demanding the Navy carve out a separate cyber warfare community. There's some in the Navy who think that, it's not worth the investment. There's a cyber capability in the joint force that we can rely on to support the Navy. Jake doesn't hold that view. He thinks that's a dangerous assumption, that the Navy needs its own cyber capability, needs its own expertise, and people that are really focused on cyber issues in the naval, in the maritime realm. So we'll see where this ends up over the next few months. But I would encourage people who are interested in that debate to read Jake's article.
Yeah, I agree. That's a terrific one. We also had Tyson Medor's article on cyber back in, I think it was the September issue. Tyson's a cyber warfare engineer, also a former naval intelligence officer. He's on our editorial board. Those two pieces taken together, I think, are a great contribution to the conversation about how critical and what kind of roles does cyber power, cyber warfare play in the maritime domain. I remember one of the things that Tyson brought out that I thought was particularly salient was the point that the Navy right now thinks about protecting its own networks, but we don't think at all about protecting commercial maritime networks. And there's a tremendous amount of threat there. And Jake builds on that as well by talking about how the Chinese have built, I guess, put their tendrils into overseas shipyards and overseas port facilities. In the news recently, there was the whole thing about, was it the port of Hamburg, that a Chinese company wanted to essentially buy that port and operate that port. There was a big discussion in Germany about whether that was a national security threat. And Jake, brings that out, that, hey, when American ships go anywhere in the world nowadays, they're likely to pull into ports, not just if they're visiting Hong Kong, but if they're visiting even our NATO allies and South Asian partners, et cetera, that they might be pulling into a port that's got extensive Chinese government tendrils into it. And therefore, that's a constant surveillance threat and probably a constant point of access threat. So Jake brings that point out very nicely. I'm going to try to get Jake and Tyson to come on the show at some point together. I think they would together be a terrific conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
Another one that I particularly liked is the article by Lieutenant Keegan Hoey, that's titled "Repair Time is the Critical Variable." It starts off, "The United States will not win a protracted war without a way to fix ships quickly and send them back to the fight." It was interesting. We had this article before we went to the Naval Submarine League event at the beginning of November over in Crystal City. That conversation at the Navy Sub League was, so much of those 2 days were focused on the industrial capacity of the United States, the shipbuilding and the submarine industrial capacity. But Lieutenant Hoey, talks about that not just from a shipbuilding or submarine building capacity, but a repair capacity. And if you look at the times when, for example, the Cole bombing in Aden, or the what was the other, the Fitzgerald having to be repaired, or the McCain having to be repaired more recently in 2017, those are one-offs, right? Those are times when the United States had not, they had combat damage in the case of the Cole, or collision damage extensive in the case of McCain and Fitzgerald. Both those things caused, or all three of those ships caused, perturbations in the deployment cycle, the readiness cycle of the Navy, and then getting them fixed cost significant amount of money. And it wasn't there was no threat in getting them back to an American port to rebuild the ship. I think Pascagoula was the case for both Cole, if I'm right, and Fitzgerald, and McCain was repaired in over in Yokosuka. But in a war, particularly if a war in the Western Pacific were to go more than weeks, there would likely be significant numbers of ships that would have to be repaired and could not just be replaced by brand new ships that were churning out. This isn't 1939, 40, 41 when the U.S. has got multiple shipyards already starting to churn out ships for war. Our capacity is pretty limited. I want to read a point from that. So Lieutenant Hoey points out, shipyard facilities. In 1981, the Office of Management and Budget started terminating subsidies for commercial shipbuilding. Undertaken during the Reagan administration, this reflected the trend away from government market interference. Since then, the domestic commercial shipbuilding market has all but collapsed. In the first 10 years following the end of subsidies, the United States saw shipbuilding workers drop from 120,000 to 72,000 and 110 shipbuilders down to 60. This trend has continued. Today, it is estimated that only 9 shipyards in the United States can construct or repair large commercial and naval ships. So I would contend, as he does, that that's a national security problem, consideration, weakness, limitation for certain.
Yeah, I mean, we all think back to World War II and what happened. Of course, that was a unique moment in American history, world history, and so it's tricky to compare eras. And some of the major differences, not among those differences, are that ships are they look the same to the average person walking down the street, maybe, but a ship built today and a ship built in 1940 are vastly different from a C4I perspective, and the complexity of the ship topside from a standpoint of again C5 ISR weapons, and so it's not just repairing the hulls in the the infrastructure of the ship. It's making the ship able to fight again, and that is, I mean, I don't know, that's not my area of expertise, but it's I think it's fanciful to think that you could do that in a few weeks for a ship that takes major damage from, say, a missile hit or something. Even if you had the shipyards, you have to have you'd have to obviously the capacity to put it in the shipyard. You have to have the worker expertise, the kind of high-end technical workforce to be able to do that quickly.
Yeah, and do we have the spares, right? Do we have the ready spares for the missiles, for the radars, for the combat systems, for all those things that pull all that information together to enable you to, find, fix, track, and target inbound missiles, send TLAMs downrange, et cetera. Yeah, it's a lot more complex than, as you point out, a naval gun system and a couple of torpedo tubes that were on a World War II era destroyer, right? We're talking variable depth sonar, we're talking combat systems, we're talking, SM2s, SM6s, TLAM targeting systems, all those things, very, very complex stuff. Good point. Brian O'Rourke, who was with us last month, unfortunately has COVID today, so he was not able to join us, our senior editor of Proceedings. He wanted us to highlight the Need to Know column, which is a terrific piece. A couple things here. One was it recaps the unmanned surface vessels that the Ukrainian Navy used to attack the Russian Navy in the port of Sevastopol. And so there's some great stuff here. Some of it comes from H.I. Sutton, who is a U.S. Naval Institute or USNI news reporter. But it, just some really interesting stuff happening as, people say, hey, what's going on and what are the lessons learned from the Ukraine war? And this is for navies, at least. This is I think incredibly important development, and just shows how thinking on their feet, adapting and quickly moving to new technologies and trying things, and it had a pretty significant impact on the Russian Navy.
Oh yeah, definitely.
The other thing I like about this, if Heather would just bring that back for a second. Yes. So First Lieutenant Kayla Haas, U.S. Marine Corps, is very good at doing, I don't know what you would call these, whiteboards, or sort of putting very complex things in simplified terms, right? And so she's taken the new national defense strategy and essentially simplified it down and highlighted the most important things from the new national defense strategy about the security environment, the approaches, the strategic guidance that's guiding it, the importance of allies and partnerships, what the defense priorities are, what are the different terminology, I guess, or goals in terms of force planning: lethal, sustainable, resilient, survival, agile, responsible. Sometimes it's difficult to wade through a national defense strategy or a national security strategy. And I highlight that Lieutenant Haas has just done a great job. If you want to print this from Proceedings or make a copy or cut it out and put it on your desk or put it above your desk, if you're looking for a quick, easy, approachable version of the new national defense strategy, she's done a terrific job with this.
And I believe integrated deterrence, for one, will be a topic of discussion at Defense Forum Washington on Tuesday, right?
That's right. Yes. Thanks for bringing that up. Right. So for folks in the National Capital area, you can come in person. So our annual Defense Forum Washington, which is one of the Naval Institute's biggest annual events and conferences, is at the Spy Museum on Tuesday, the 6th of December. It starts at 9 o'clock, goes to about 12:30 or so. And it will also be available virtual. You can attend online. And I think we've got hundreds of people signed up already to attend both in person and virtually. And the topic of that day's event is going to be about the integrated defense strategy. Integrated deterrence is the term that the Pentagon is using, and a lot of people are criticizing that. So I know one of the speakers that day is going to be Representative Mike Gallagher from Wisconsin. He's a Republican, but he's also a former Marine, and he's been pretty outspoken on naval issues, on shipbuilding issues, and he's been outspoken on this. His criticism is it's PowerPoint deep. So one of the deputy, Assistant Secretaries of State's or Secretary of Defense's for strategy is going to be describing that integrated deterrence strategy. What is it? How's it working? What are the sticking points? So it should be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. Austin Roberto says pictures do help monkeys like me. Me too. I love pictures. Pictures. The picture does picture says 1,000 words. And speaking of pictures, so I don't think we've got them already loaded up to mention here, but the December issue includes the winners and runners up from this year's Naval Institute photo contest. So lots of great images from the photo contest this year. About what do we get? 12 pages in the issue. Here, I'll just hold up a couple of the shots there. But the photo contest winners are always published in the December issue, and so that's if you're a big fan of naval photography, maritime photography, check it out. What other articles did you have on your mind, Bill?
Well, I wanted to mention the Ask and Answer column this month for our listeners. This column has been running now more than 3 years. I think this is actually the 50th. Iteration of Ask and Answered since we started in 2019. It's been, I think, pretty popular and with our readers. We get some really interesting answers from all kinds of subscribers. And this one is about the American military cemeteries overseas. The American Battle Monuments Commission operates and maintains 26 American military cemeteries overseas. Most are in Europe, but not all. There's actually the first one ever was in Mexico City for the Mexican-American War. And this is different than the VA. The VA runs Arlington National Cemetery. It runs the Punch Bowl National Cemetery of the Pacific out in Hawaii. So these are only cemeteries. AMBC is only cemeteries on foreign soil. And so we got some really good, interesting answers of people that have visited some or many, and what was their most interesting visit, their most moving moment. And it is very moving. And I've been to 6 of them in my life, and 5 in Europe and 1 in North Africa. And I would encourage anybody who is anywhere near one of these cemeteries on vacation or traveling for work, if you have an hour or two, go to one of these cemeteries. It is an amazing experience, walking the rows in St. Normandy. This is not like a normal cemetery in your hometown. Everybody, all these crosses, the ages are 18, 19, 20, 18, and it's just an amazing experience. The nations that host them do a fantastic job on maintaining it. Really, I think that was what I wanted to say about that column.
Well, I'll say something additional about the column, because it was your idea a couple of years ago to do this, and it's always in the last page. So if you open up the Proceedings, and you've got cover 3 and 4 here, and the last page of the magazine is Asked and Answered. We've been running this 2.5 years now? More than 3.
September of 19 was our first one.
Yeah, and it's very well read. They're fun. It's quick. It's easy. It's engaging. Interesting topics. The one coming up for the January issue is what is the most interesting, storied, dangerous sea and anchor detail you ever participated in, right? So we should get some amazing stories, for that one. And if you're watching this or listening to this and you haven't, contributed to Asked and Answered, it's very easy to do. You can email 50 words. So you don't have to write 500 words. We're talking 50 words, and send it in to Asked and Answered, all one word, asked and answered at usni.org as an email. Bill puts that column together. We get just some amazing sea stories. We get amazing personal, poignant stories. I love that column every month. It's been a terrific addition to the magazine. And that one about American cemeteries overseas is probably one of the best so far. Yeah, good point. I want to highlight something called Combat Fleets. So every month we have a one-pager. It's called Combat Fleets. It's written by Eric Wertheim, who's the author of Combat Fleets. The last time that we published that is a very thick compendium, desktop reference. It's also available online, the Combat Fleets book. But Eric, he used to do this a few years ago. He would pick, sort of 3 platforms, foreign platforms a year. And we asked him to go a little bit more in depth and just pick one, and to focus, particularly the last couple of years, to focus on the Chinese Navy, the Russian Navy, and the most significant allied and partner navies, and occasionally including a new or important U.S. platform that perhaps not everybody in the U.S. Navy was all that aware of, or hadn't been thinking about, or didn't know the details on. But this month it's Japan's advanced lithium-ion batteries, and so this one he talks about the Taige. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. Japan's new Taige class of diesel-electric submarines that have lithium-ion batteries rather than lead-acid type batteries. And he points out that lithium battery advantages have been well known for generations, and the batteries are a common element in consumer technology, so definitely in your cell phone. Their onboard use in submarines, however, remains extremely limited because of the inherent danger posed by hydrogen gas and intense heat that can be released by batteries in the event of malfunction and fire. But the Japanese Self-Defense Force and its industrial base have learned to manage these challenges, and they've built a couple of submarines that and a submarine class, that more coming, that are incredibly capable, probably the most highly advanced in terms of operational capability, underwater speed and endurance, of any submarine in the world. So check that out. Check out Eric Wertheim's Combat Fleets every month. It's a quick, 5-minute read. It's a one pager. It will clue you in, particularly, every month the stuff that he's written about the Chinese Navy, new platforms, but also our allies and partners, new ships and submarines and aircraft have been particularly helpful. So I love that. Brian O'Rourke has joined us in the chat room, and he says, lithium and water, boom. Yeah. As I think, didn't, what was the Boeing aircraft? I want to say it was not the P-8, it's their newest airliner some years ago. There was an issue with a fire, a lithium-ion battery fire.
The Dreamliner.
What's that?
The Dreamliner.
That's right, the 787, the Dreamliner. Yeah, so they had lithium-ion batteries, or they do, and Boeing faced that issue as well, and there was an issue with a fire on board, but they had to get around that, right? The Dreamliner. Okay, so other thoughts? We should probably wrap this up shortly, but anything else on your mind?
Next week is Army Navy week. Army Navy game back in Philadelphia next Saturday, so there'll be a lot of activity around the yard going on next week. As for those who are either Academy grads or familiar with that, that's a big deal around here.
Yeah, it definitely is. Followed immediately by final exams and mids running home for the Christmas holiday break, and so it's an exciting time. I'll double down on a couple of upcoming events for us. So first, we already mentioned Defense Forum Washington, but tune in on Tuesday, 6th December. Either come in person to the Spy Museum. It's a great venue downtown Washington. We've got a couple members of Congress who play critical roles in the House Armed Services Committee, the subcommittees that deal with naval and maritime issues. We're going to be talking about integrated deterrence. What is it? What are the shortcomings of it so far? Where's the Pentagon going with that new strategy? Following that, coming up in January, we'll have a booth at Surface Navy Association, their 35th annual symposium. So we're looking forward to being at SNA, as we always are. We'll have a booth. We'll probably do some episodes of the podcast there. So if you go to SNA, please stop by and see us. We're going to have some T-shirts to give out. We're going to have some books to give out. We'll make some members, and looking forward to that. And then, the biggest event that the Naval Institute does every year is West. And so this year, West will be in San Diego. I think the dates are 14, 15, 16 February at the Convention Center, free and open to all active duty folks. And if you're a member of the Naval Institute and you're not on active duty anymore, you get a big discount for being a member of the Naval Institute coming to West. But we'll have the Sea Service chiefs, so the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the CNO, and the Commandant of the Coast Guard will all be there. I think the Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Berger, is his address is the kickoff. He'll be the kickoff speaker on day one. Should be a great event, and so put that on your calendar. 14, 15, 16 February. If you're on the West Coast, if you're in San Diego, please come out and see us.
Yeah. Also, I think we should mention that we're working on the January issue right now, and next year is our 150th anniversary of the Naval Institute. So starting in January, readers are going to see an extra 8 pages in each magazine. There'll be a heritage section in each issue. Around a theme, some theme that transcends generations, transcends eras, that has been written on and debated in the forum and proceedings over time. So more to follow. I don't want to spoil the surprise for everyone.
Yeah, and so for all of our members and all of our subscribers, there's an extra 8 pages in every issue in 2023. So a normal issue of Proceedings most months is 96 pages. So every month will be 104 pages, except for the March issue, which is our Naval Review, will be whatever it is, plus 8 pages of heritage section with some of those great history pieces from our archives. That's a great reminder. And the other thing that our listeners and our viewers will see is that for so far, since the April issue of 2022, which was the first issue that we published after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We've had the Ukraine flag on the top left corner of the cover of Proceedings every month since then. And I just drafted yesterday, and Pete sent it, a letter to the Ukrainian ambassador in Washington with all the covers that we've had with the Ukrainian flag on the cover so far. We will be transitioning, however, for our 150th year, 2023, the Ukrainian flag will go away on the cover, not because we're stopping our support for Ukraine, but really because we're going to be putting the emblem, our logo for our 150th, our sesquicentennial anniversary on the cover. So you'll see that on the top left cover of Proceedings every month for 2023. But yes, there'll be an extra 8-page section of history, heritage, things, great tidbits. And if you want to see what that might look like, in the September issue, Dennis Clift did a look back on naval aviation, 100 years of carrier aviation, where he pulled out some of the better articles and highlighted some of the key points in those aviation articles for the past century. That's the kind of thing we'll be doing. And Dennis Clift, who's 85 years old, still working full-time on our staff. He is just the genius emeritus at the Naval Institute. He's an amazing human being. And Dennis was the editor-in-chief of Proceedings actually early in his career. In the early 1960s, he was editor-in-chief for a couple of years before he went to work for numerous administrations, White Houses, national security advisor to Vice President Mondale, et cetera. Really, really interesting guy. But Dennis is the guy who knows where all the skeletons are buried in Proceedings over the years, and he's been digging out those tidbits. And so he's the guy behind those heritage sections coming up and starting, as you said, in January, which we're working on already. All right. Well, I think that wraps it up. Brian says no word on whether PFC Chesty will attend West. Fingers crossed. Is there a PFC Chesty?
I don't know what he means.
I don't know what he means either. But I'll be at West. So if there's a PFC Chesty the 16th, hopefully I'll meet him. All right. And then let's see. One last question. Azure Sentry says, any chance of articles on Navy seaplanes being dug up for those heritage sections? Ooh, that's a great point. I'll mention that to Dennis. I would imagine that there will be. And I will point out, if you like seaplanes, we just published the three winners of the fiction contest, and they're published online right now. And the third prize winner is called Splash 12. And I don't want to give it away, but there's seaplanes play a significant role in the story. It's a great story. It's fiction. And the picture that we chose is a little bit of Back to the Future, because there are no seaplanes in the U.S. Navy right now. We dug one up, a Martin P-6Y from the 1950s, and we modernized it and sort of fictionalized the picture. And that's the image for that story. Splash 12. Go to our website. It's on the Proceedings homepage. And it's the third prize in the fiction contest. And Heather just threw that into the link of that into the chat window too. So, all right. Well, this was a great conversation. We could go on for, as I said, we could talk about the December issue for hours, but we won't do that to you. You'll have to tune in, go to the website, read it, or get it in your mailbox, which for our print members, our print subscribers, you should already have it at home. That wraps up another episode. The podcast brought to you by Blue Cross Blue Shield Dental Coverage. I can't help myself from smiling right now. That's because I have Blue Cross Blue Shield FEP Dental. I pay no deductible for in-network services. My in-network preventive care is fully covered, including 3 cleanings a year, and plans start as low as $20 a month. Learn more at bcbsfepdental.com. If you enjoy the show, like us, subscribe to the channel, tell your friends, become a member at usni.org/join. Until next week, remember, victory begins at the Naval Institute.